Hello friends, welcome to the MARE podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy!
Hello friends, welcome to another episode of the MARE podcast. I am very happy to welcome Max in the podcast today. So I just realized that I didn't ask you how to pronounce your last name. Do you want to pronounce it for me?
It's the first question asking in German. Yeah, it's Fiederling actually. So it's
Fiederling.
Max Fiederling would be
Excellent.
the
Okay,
best.
it's not that difficult. I think I can
It's
say
not
it.
that difficult, no. Maybe
Max
maybe
Fiederling.
from just reading and then trying the first time if you're not used to, but not a
Yeah,
big
I mean, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how languages work all the time. So I may read Fiddling, but then you'll be like, oh yeah, actually there's 3 silent letters in there. So, but anyway, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Welcome to the podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, George.
Max, you're a maritime archaeologist. You are an archaeologist. I see that you're broadly, if I can like encapsulate, you're interested in Roman archaeology mostly, and you're interested in trade and ports and the economy. But we'll talk about more detail about that in more detail. So now you have finished your PhD in 2022, and you're working in an ERC funded project called STRADA. That's an acronym for what?
This is for a simulation of transport between the Adriatic and the Danube. It's a bit like with all these, it's a construction, but basically it's quite fitting because it's about ancient road systems and on land and on water. So it fits quite.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's a smart acronym. So tell me a bit about it. What are you doing in that project? What is it about? What's your role in it?
Yeah, the idea of the ERC STRADA project is to make a new evaluation of travel times between, like in the field of interest, between the Danube and the Adriatic. And this, as it was the reality back then, on land and on water. So in comparison to other already existing simulations like Orbis or some others, the basic idea behind the project is not to come up with new travel times, but the idea or the question is which of these routes for 110 AD roughly were to be evaluated by the people using them. So to keep it simple, like which of the routes at what time and year was more preferable than others, because it was clear that this route, for example, was a sure thing in that month and the other maybe in another month. So it is more about how to calculate different routes and not the time, especially because economically speaking, it was, like it is today, even more important, like not how fast something is arriving, but that it is arriving on the time you expect it to be. So this is the basic question behind the project. And I was asked in 2021, actually, in the end, like still finishing PhD, I got a call on a route back from a project in Sicily, just out of nowhere, basically. And I was asked if I would like to overtake the part of reconstructing the Roman waterways for 110 AD between the Danube and the Adriatic in 4 years. And I was just like, okay, wow, this sounds on the one hand interesting, and on the other hand, maybe a bit a lot. And I had back then no clue at all how to do stuff like this anyway. So I was, captured by this idea, and then I got to work into it. And now it's nearly finished. Like July next year is the end of the project. So we're basically on the final row. Like the simulation is running now this month, first time, and we completed all the groundwork, all the archaeological groundwork, putting all that together. So looking back, it was quite a journey, and I learned quite a lot about the methods possible at hand to try to do something like this. So,
Mm.
but to ask to answer the question in one single sentence, like I'm employed to come up with a reconstruction proposal for rivers, lakes, and like the parts of the lagoon
Mhm.
of Grado and modern day Venice. So
Oh, that is fantastic, and I have so many questions. um, okay, let's start by, I think, the question that I always find most interesting in these types of so you put everything into a GIS environment, right, to run simulations and calculations. So I'm very interested in what are the aspects that you throw into that calculation, and maybe if you can tell us the things that you would like to put but you can't, and or do you feel like, oh, I've covered every possible aspect of it?
this is funny because this is the slide which one's always know that it will be funny and problematic to show someone in a lecture, because the slide is like massively full with methods and sources and stuff, and everybody's sitting there and looking at you and thinking like, okay, what the hell are they telling us? They had to like implement everything basically. So yeah, it was a good way of trying to decide in many edges what to leave out and what to take in, because when you have 4.5 years for stuff like this in this huge capacity, it yeah, many things were not possible to do. So um, the method I used is was not invented by me, but by a guy by the name Uwe Arauner. He's was working in water organization, water department of a German bigger town, and he worked there for over 20 years. So he had quite some idea about how like geology and river evolution and stuff like this work together, and he combined this with the ancient times of like Roman landscape reconstruction. And he trained, or I had the chance to get trained by him by the method he developed to in a combination of QGIS and Global Mapper, and how to implement like all coal drilling data and like digital elevation maps, and of course all the data we get from archaeological contexts and single finds and so on. So I had to adapt this method because he had 8 years for something like 5 kilometers, and we had like 4 years from the Danube to the Adriatic. So yeah, we had to adapt this method, but basically I tried to use all available archaeological data, like positioning, heights, and stuff like this, for every context and relevant single find collection from around 110 AD, like roughly, of course, a bit more before and afterwards, because otherwise it would have been a miracle to do it. So this is, of course, like the main part, and we got a lot of help of all different departments from all different sub countries in Austria, and so we got millions of data sets to use, which was which was a blessing. Otherwise, no chance to gather this as well in the time. So this was the base. Then I had to try to use some hydrology stuff. So like calculation for high tide, 30, 50, 100 years. So risk assessment, modern time from Austria and Upper Italy, like flooding shapes and stuff like this. A lot of geology, because when you try to differentiate which of your landscape is still like have something left from Roman times, you have to make a first assessment from a geological point of view. And yeah, of course, then everything else you can think of, bathymetry from lakes and rivers, and own field work we conducted partially by surveying or side scan sonar and stuff like this, collecting bits and pieces together we could, going through archives, museums, trying to find any hints on crafts, vessels from Roman times, or bridges, or everything you can basically think of. So it was quite a journey through all different materials, object types, context, features, anything, and to try to put this all together in the end. And yeah, this ends up basically in a combination of QGIS and Global Mapper. Global Mapper is also like a program like QGIS, so it's also nearly the same for everyone who's not so into these things, but it's especially designed to come up with some 3D volume stuff of water bodies, and to combine DEMs, so digital elevation models, with self-created 3D volumes of like landscapes or stuff like this. So the combination work to try to make it easy to understand in QGIS, I had to reconstruct an ancient water ground level, which like derived from all the stuff I just talked about before. And this simple like proposal for an ancient water level, I put into Global Mapper, and I switched this back and forth with a like DEM from nowadays, mainly from below half a meter precision. So what you get then is like a visualization of all the areas which were back then maybe submerged, or at least at some times. And this gives you like a first nice idea of how the area would have looked like in like high contrast. I think this is also the main reason why it's so important to do this in many places in Roman Empire in the future, because you get at least an idea of extremes, like small rivers, wide rivers, deep basins, stuff where you stand today in the area and you have no clue, no chance at all, because everything looks the same. Every like river is drenched, and there's nothing left of this. But if you apply this method, you get a first rough idea of how the landscape was in heavy contrast sometimes. So this is could be really important to assess strategic choosing points of settlements or military strategies, or everything which is connected with the decision where to place something in these times.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean,
I try to cope with your question. I think it's pretty rough to do this, mainly when your day-to-day job is solely into this for me right now. So it's maybe a bit detailed, but I hope that the idea was transported. What we're doing, or what I'm doing right now, still.
Of course. I mean, yeah, and it sounds absolutely fascinating. So I wanted to like to take this a bit, not further, but just to paint a picture of it. When we talk about the Danube River in the Roman times, right? How big of a river was it? How were the ships sailing on it? Are we talking about river boats, or are we talking about huge boats that transfer lots and lots of stuff? So give us like maybe paint us a picture of how you think it would have looked like.
It's a very, very important question, and the answer, there is no answer actually, but to try to give an answer is always important to keep in mind for any water system in these times, because for the Danube, like it's a pretty important and huge river still today, and it was back in the time one of the important rivers in the area, in the huge area. So it is always hard to compare the Danube with other rivers, because it's a special. There are many special things about, like, from military aspects speaking, and also from transport east to west and so on. So, but also the Danube had parts, or it looks like at least had parts back then in the beginning of 2nd century AD, which were pretty wide, like 3 kilometers wide, sometimes with, I don't know, 8, 10, 15 like arms, like the Danube Delta today, or the Amazonas, or if you would like just to go to Italy, to like to the Tagliamento River, or to these, a few rivers are left in Europe, which where you can see how how also the Danube looked back in the day, probably. So sometimes pretty wide, huge, massively huge, and more shallow, like up to 3 meters, something, sometimes only half a meter. And yeah, and another place it was also naturally like trenched back then, so maybe just a few 100 meters, or like even the same prospect that we get today. So there was a big difference in different parts. And of course, for the Danube, like Roman military had big interest in having this as a, yeah, as a border, or let's say it more as a control um, position,
Yeah.
um, like the limes, which was never a real border, but the place where
Hmm.
you could control exchange and entering and leaving goods and people and ideas and everything. So on the Danube, there were over time a lot of like military vessels operating, like, you know, the Mainz type or the Oberstimm, like the patrol boats from
Hmm.
Imperial Age and late Roman times, we know of by real archaeological context. So there were small, fast, and pretty high developed vessels, which could be sailed or rowed as well, equipped with high tech weapons. So it would have been like the Formula One, like patrolling on the edge, let's call it, and
Yeah.
to show off, okay, we're here, we can cope with a lot of kilometers a day, and you better don't mess with us because, yeah, like we're
Yeah.
here and we're the best. So this is from the military point of view. Of course, there were probably a lot more transporters, like the flat bottom boats. Everyone today
Hmm.
still knows, maybe in their own country, because you can find flat bottom boats from Polynesia over Turkey to wherever. They're of course used everywhere because it's pretty practical to have a boat with a flat bottom on a shallow river or lake. You can transport a hell of tons of material or people or an army, but you
Hmm.
can, yeah, also, and you don't have a problem with the drought. So there were probably hundreds of them operating on the rivers and lakes, and also on the Danube, like trying to going back and forth, transporting army detachments or their like daily life material and stuff like this. And on
Yeah.
top of this, of course, you have to assume all the other vessels from lock boats, like they used to look like back from Neolithic times, we know, but they never changed, and they still use them in Bronze Age and also in Iron Age and in Roman
Hmm.
times. So you have to like put all these different vessels together in your mind, on even on the river, like the Danube, and many more like small vessels just to transport people from one side to another, fishing vessels. Like I always tell people, if they ask like, okay, how many Roman type vessels we know of, I like try to tell them,
Hmm.
okay, we know like these wrecks and these types and so on, but just go in a modern day harbor and take a look around, and you will see in like 30 seconds you will see so many different types of vessels, boats, and ships. Like it is hardly to assume that they were all there back then also. So there
Oh
were
yes.
many more types. We have no clue whatsoever. Then we find, for instance, one new type, and now there is a new type established, but it's one one ship for
One
the
ship.
whole empire. And this is like it is it was much more like complicated, or yeah, pretty huge variety of stuff going on there. So
Oh yeah.
for the Danube as well, it was like a huge, like today, huge river, huge transport and controlling system, connecting basically east and west over hundreds of the, yeah, thousands of kilometers. So pretty important
Absolutely.
route.
Pretty important. And I mean, you speak about when you say things like, we see a tiny part of it, like for example, in shipbuilding and ship construction. And I think this can apply to a lot of archaeological finds, no matter where you are, where you say that, oh yeah, we know about that, but we see a tiny bit of it, and we try to see as much as possible. And I think that's where a project like Strada comes in, where you try to create as an authentic picture as possible for the Danube River. And I am very interested to know what's the end goal of the project. Do you plan on publishing this as a database, just like Orbis, or how is this going to roll out in papers, books, databases?
Yeah, this is funny that you say, because we had a meeting today exactly discussing this, because
Oh.
it's pretty important. Yeah, and it's not so easy to answer, because when you're in cultural science or in archaeology, you always know, okay, you have to publish in paper, and you have to publish open access and digital, of course. So, but it's one thing just to know, okay, we have to do this, but it is an intelligent way to think about how to use these different formats and what to do with it. Of course, in this case, it's an EU project, so open access is one of the main goals from the beginning. So the whole simulation, which is right now being built by our IT specialist, will be open access in the end, as well, like all, if manageable, all our raw data we collected in the years, which is basically quite a lot. So the question will be how to deal with a digital online presentation of the results and of like the structure. But maybe we will find a way to publish online the structure of the simulation. So because the basic idea right from the beginning was that everyone in the future can take the structure and the idea behind, and not only the idea, but the real simulation structure, and can fill it with their own data. Because it is, I think, and I'm not the only one thinking this, it's useless to create all these like projects new and again, and to wait then for other persons doing this the same way from scratch. So main idea of this project right from the beginning, when our chef was writing this proposal, was that it is to be used in future by others. So the structure will be somehow being downloadable or just usable. Yeah. So the one thing will be open access of the simulation. And of course, there will be at least one monography for the results from the different departments, like from my side for examples on the waterways, and from my colleague Christian Beck on the landscape, on the land routes. There will be like a closing conference, huge conference at the University of Graz next year, with a lot of participants from all the different places in the area we were working. So they will contribute to this as well. So there will be, of course, like this historical, archaeologically reviewed print version by us, with a collection, like let's say with some samples of questions and ideas on all the data. Because now the simulation is like nearly finished, but now the work basically really starts, because the simulation will put out data, and we will have to deal with like what they say or what they could say us. So this will be a game changer again. So from that point of view, I even can't answer your question, because I don't know what is coming on the horizon. It might be that we will have so much stuff on one specific like interesting outcome that we will have to shift in this direction as well. But we will have a lot of print stuff. We already like try to publish at least each year quite some aspects on different things on the field work or on different regions and examples, and we will do so still right until the end, and we will combine this with the open access. And there is a homepage right now existing with some information and at least some insights visually for pictures and image movie and stuff like this. And we will try to implement there also a way of visualization of the simulation itself. So hopefully this will also be available.
Okay, yeah, I see. Fantastic. So talking about dissemination and disseminating work to not only to the academic community, but to the wider public as well. I've seen, having stalked you, I've read in your CV that you have worked in film and the television industry. So do you have in mind creating something audiovisual for the project?
It's nice asking. Yeah, I had a nice small part of my life between studying archaeology. I went for 3 years, bit more, bit less, to movie business, and I still there's quite a lot of stuff I learned back then, which I put to use today. Not only about organizing like excavations or field work or so on,
Oh, right.
but putting also all this into perspective, like you say. So it is, as you basically know yourself quite well, it's quite hard to come up with something like documentary or even a good photo strip of a field campaign or so if you are heavily involved in the
Mm,
stuff itself.
yeah.
So it's normally impossible. But of course, I try to do this. So I try to put this to use as well. And we had a few ideas, and some worked out, like some documentary guys from all the different countries came for short parts of the field work, and were following our like drone flights, thermal drone flights, and the side scan sonar stuff on the Danube. And so there were the ideas, and they were implemented in some ways. But
Mm.
of course, it is always problematic to make this in the same time happen, like you do, like to, yeah, like trying to do the science stuff. So, but yeah, I would really like to, and I'm tending more back towards this time over time, like staying in contact with people from back then, and like talking with them about what they do, how they do, why they do their documentary stuff they do, and what they're focusing on, because it's a nice way to keep in contact with like artistic society, looking on cultural stuff as well, and also on what we do on a daily basis. So not it also helps to get the perspective right still, and not
Oh,
to lose
yes.
yourself completely in what you do.
And that's important, right? Because I mean, you've had a long career so far. Like, I've been at the end of a postdoc, basically, near Sea Fund project postdoc, being a research associate. Yeah, I mean, you can really feel after many, many years in archaeology that you're kind of like losing touch with what's going on, and you need to like reset. So that's a very important thing that you're mentioning. But I've been so excited about this Strada project that I haven't actually even mentioned what you've done before. So you were, before that, you were a doctoral student at the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, and you wrote a thesis about reconstructing a Roman wreck. Correct. So do you want to give us a summary of that? What that was about?
All right, try a summary on this. In March 2016, I was pretty lucky because we detected a Roman shipwreck in the Black Sea, at the Romanian Black Sea coast, just south of the Danube Delta. And I had on that occasion, I had the chance to be the first down there after like a few hundreds, couple of thousands of years. So this was pretty amazing moment. And on top of that, I had the chance to work that then over and to follow this right until the end, to 2022. So basically, it is a Roman transport vessel from mid second century AD, which is like you can see a profile in the back
No.
of the camera right now. So it was a merchant vessel which was probably coming from northern Turkish coast, going to Crimea, and then the western took the western route down modern day Romanian coast, and probably came into a storm. The funny and pretty amazing thing about is not only the preservation status, because when I got down there, the first thing I saw was a mast piece and parts of the hull, and like over these 600 amphorae, which were stuck still
600.
quite in the
Wow.
row. So in the end, probably ship was carrying 2,500 of these
Jesus
small
Christ.
small vessels. But yeah, in pretty shallow water, so 4 to 6 meters. So basically, like says Fontanelles and other contexts, pretty shallow for this preservation status. not like the other Black Sea wrecks we know in the anoxic layers deep down, but this one still in pretty good shape, but pretty shallow. So yeah, there was a chance of destruction or of disturbance pretty at hand. So we had to deal with this. And archaeologically speaking, it was amazing because these 2,500 amphoras seem to be empty the time the ship sank. So it was an empty transporter, probably. Like the amphorae, in the beginning, they were used for transporting wine from the northern Turkish region, but they were heavily used over more than a decade, probably. And they already had holes, and there were so many, like, there were different variants of the same type that were mixed through. By content analysis, it became clear that there were red and white wine in the beginning they were transporting. So all these vessels were mixed. So there were no stoppers. Like we had 7 layers of amphorae with the packing material still around, so grass and insects from the grass and stuff like this, but no stoppers up to the last layer. So the amphora were all empty, and they were on the first hand, it seemed like quite improbability or a problem to explain. But if you look closer to many Roman contexts, you find the reuse or the recycling of former used vessels pretty normal. Like you find them everywhere, from Hadrian's mausoleum to the harbor of Fréjus, where the drainage of the jetty is just built by old amphorae. So you found this building techniques or any other use of these old vessels still like mainly intact, quite on a daily basis in all Roman provinces. So this is probably, or maybe this is the first context where you have a ship full of collected old vessels which were tried to be put to use to a final use, maybe in a building project or something. So this was a bit
Very
tough,
interesting.
but pretty interesting to write about, as well as all the,
Yeah.
like the packing material, like all the grass stuff and insects, and so like the
I mean,
preservation, just amazing. Yeah.
that sounds fantastic and very intriguing. Is this? Have you managed to publish this? Is this?
It is published in in the series of the LMU Munich of the archaeological studies. It is in a monograph is published. Sadly, for the first, I think, 1.5 years, it's not open access, so you have to buy the book, even like the ebook or the real book. But after 1.5 years, it will be complete free PDF version. So,
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
and for
wonderful.
everyone out there not speaking German, it is of course a digital PDF, so you can like translate it easy.
Translate
And there is
it.
a big abstract in English, like big one, real big one, and one in Romanian. So if anyone is capable of Romanian, then
Wow,
also, yeah.
that
So
is fantastic. Max, thank you so much for your time. This has been a very, very intriguing and can I say academically stimulating, intellectually stimulating conversation. And the work you're doing is great. It's absolutely fantastic. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Do you have any closing remarks for this episode for the people listening?
closing remarks. This
Mm.
is a good thing. Maybe if we just talk about like what we do or what I do in these projects. Maybe I think it is a good format from the M.A.R.E podcast to bring specialists, of course, together, young, older, and everyone, but also interested people in the stuff at hand and what we do and why we do it. So maybe try to close with an idea or with a basic thing. I'm always coming back these days where there is a lot of problems in society or being talked about, and I think submerged heritage or underwater archaeology has like the inherent opportunity to speak about connectivity between cultures and areas and zones, and ideas about the exchange, not only of goods like amphorae, stuff like this, but also of ideas and on beliefs. And this is something we shall definitely not forget, trying to put to use in modern society, because there is a lot of thing we can show off what happened in the past, why it happened, and how people learn from mistakes, and how useful it is to work together or to listen to each other, at least. So maybe this as a closing remark.
Wonderful, beautifully put. So thank you again. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you, George. Bye-bye.